A newly released government report is revealing the dire consequences of climate change. The report was mandated by Congress and written with the help of dozens of agencies. It says climate change has staggering economic and public health consequences. It also says the Earth's climate is changing faster than any point in history, primarily due to human activity. The Trump administration has faced accusations of trying to bury the report by releasing it over the holiday weekend. The White House responded Friday, saying in part, the report is largely based on the most extreme scenario, which contradicts long-established trends by assuming that despite strong economic growth that would increase greenhouse gas emissions, there would be limited technology and innovation and rapidly expanding population. To better assess the potential future effects of climate change, we need to focus on improving the transparency and accuracy of our modeling and projections. Joining me now is CBS News contributing meteorologist Jeff Buridelli. Jeff, what is the main takeaway from this report?
For me, I would say I was impressed by the unequivocal language that humans are causing climate change through the use of fossil fuels, the burning of fossil fuels, and the increasing emissions and concentrations of carbon dioxide and methane in the atmosphere. The language was really strong, really clear. It leaves really no room for debate whatsoever, but it also says something else as well. And a couple of the quotes that we have here: our Earth's climate is now changing faster than at any point in the history of modern civilization, and it's primarily as a result of human activities. And why that's important is people always say, well, what's the perfect temperature of Earth? If it goes up a couple of degrees, what's the big deal? It's not the change, it's the rate of change. Humans have never experienced change this fast, so we're concerned about that. It concludes that the evidence of human-caused climate change is overwhelming and contributes to the strengthening. But here's the thing that they point out several times in the report. They say the severity of future impacts will depend largely on actions taken to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to adapt to the changes that will occur. Basically saying that the future is still in our hands. So that's what I would say is the biggest takeaway from this report.
The report lays out some of the impacts right here in the U.S. What are they?
There's a lot of impacts, and we're seeing them every year. So first of all, we know that climate change is causing and is going to cause more extreme events in the future. Now, extreme events could be heat waves. They, believe it or not, could even be cold snaps. It's contrary to what you might think. Global warming in certain places can actually cause bigger cold snaps because we think, and there's a lot of scientific evidence over the past few years, that the jet stream is being manipulated by something we call Arctic amplification. The Arctic is warming at 2 to 3 times the rest of the globe, and it's causing all these strange situations and perturbations in the jet stream. But I'd say more concisely, it's especially storms like hurricanes that are producing a lot more rain, like Hurricane Harvey. We had as much as 50 to 60 inches of rain with Hurricane Harvey, something that we've never experienced before in modern history. Also, drought increasing in parts of the West, which we think is also contributing to longer fire seasons and larger fires, burning for a longer period of time and burning more acres. And so, there's lots of reasons why the economic damage is increasing because of these larger storms, bigger droughts, bigger heat waves.
Does the report say anything about whether we should expect more hurricanes like we did see this year, the fires in California that have been so horrific?
Yeah, so you would expect these to continue and for the conditions to get worse, right? In the future, most of the computer models that we model, most of the experts, most of the papers that come out say we might see actually a few less storms, hurricanes, let's say, in the future, but those storms are likely to be stronger. The Category 4s, the Category 5s are going to go up. Why that's important is you could literally have 5 landfalling Category 1 hurricanes and have only 1 landfall in Category 5 hurricane, and that Category 5 is going to cause a lot more damage than all the Category 1s combined. That's why this is so important. Even if we see less hurricanes in the future, we may see 1 or 2 less in the future on average per year, but the storms that develop are likely to be much stronger, and that causes exponentially more damage and economic impact.
What does the report say the impact of climate change will be on agriculture?
All right, so there's a lot of changes here. In the Midwest, so the eastern part of the Midwest, east of the Plain States, we're expecting more floods, more extreme rain events. And so farmers there are getting ready for more erosion. They're having to plan for more erosion. West of that, in the western part of the Plain States, we see the 100th meridian, or the 100-degree longitudinal line, actually moving east by 100 miles over the past several decades. So literally the drier air from the deep southwest, that desert air, is moving across the plain states and pushing that drier, arid air across the plain states in the time constraints of a generation. So farmers are seeing this happen literally in their lifetimes, and they're really concerned about what that means for the future, the economic impacts, what kind of crops they can plant in the future. So there are lots of impacts to agriculture, and obviously lots of impact to yields. They're expecting, in certain places at least, for the agricultural yields to go down, and they said that in this report.
You mentioned the impact of us, of humans, on the climate. What does the report say some of the other factors or more about humans that's causing this rise?
It's just fossil fuel burning. I mean, it's mostly fossil fuel burning. People always ask, how much of climate change is due to human beings? It is nearly 100%. It's really simple. We just simply run mathematical equations. How much is due to the sun? How much is due to orbital changes? How much is due to volcanoes? How much is due to land use change? How much is due to carbon dioxide and other fossil fuels? And every computer model, because they're using a lot of the same mathematical equations, says that nearly 100% is due to the burning of fossil fuels. Just to give you an idea of where we are right now. If you go back 800,000 years, or likely 2 to 3 million years, we have never had carbon dioxide this high. Over the past 800,000 years, carbon dioxide levels have never been higher than 300 parts per million, and more likely most of the time at around 270 parts per million. We're at 410 parts per million. We're conducting this big science experiment on the human population right now. We're playing with fire, and even if there weren't major changes to, let's say, the weather and to agriculture, think about it. If you manipulate the carbon dioxide concentrations in the atmosphere, increase them by 40% over the course of 150 years, you are playing with fire.
What can we do to help slow down the impacts of climate change?
Well, there's a lot of things we can do. First of all, the good news, and they mentioned in this report, that communities, businesses, cities are actually already taking steps. They realize that there's real world impacts to their local communities and to their businesses. There's also a big push for divestment in many areas. They're asking businesses and people to divest from owning stock in irresponsible companies, whatever those irresponsible companies are. And there's also the grassroots element, the human element, people like me and you. We personally can't do much, right? If I said, make sure you turn your light off, make sure you replace your light bulbs, make sure you drive a car that has good gas economy, or maybe drive an electric car, you personally don't make a difference, but I bet you rub off on your neighbors. You buy an electric car, your neighbors see that, you put solar panels on your roof because you save money, your neighbors see that. So it can really legitimately be a grassroots thing. And I would say the economic value that's being generated by solar and wind advancing as fast as it is, people are seeing savings. I had a Prius, I just sold my Prius, I don't need a car anymore, I'm living in the city, but the bottom line is I'm saving money. And when people realize they can save money off of the technological advances that are now here and going to be coming more so in the future, this is going to be something that literally builds at the grassroots and then moves upward from there. So I really do think that people like you and me, as small and little as we are, we have an influence on the rest of the people around us, and eventually that does come together and kind of cascade and make a difference. So there's lots of ways that we can do it. It's government, it's people like you and me too.
Small change can make a big difference.
Yes.
Here's something I'm curious about. President Trump tweeted about having one of the coldest Thanksgiving days ever. Perhaps global warming isn't real. How are scientists measuring climate change? Explain to our viewers what we're looking at from a broad picture.
So there is something called climate attribution. Climate scientists are getting much better at it. They'll oftentimes look at an interesting situation and say, okay, let's try to study that particular situation, be it Hurricane Harvey. They attributed 15 to 20% on average of the rain that was produced in Hurricane Harvey to human-caused climate change, human-caused warming. But we can do the same with cold air outbreaks in the eastern half of the country. So right now, the eastern half of America, in Washington, in New York, kind of the centers of our world, right, are very cold. And so it seems like, well, how can climate change be true? But the rest of the world is way above normal right now. Air temperatures around the world, if you measure them against the air temperatures back in the 1800s, so right after the Industrial Revolution, air temperatures right now are up around 1 degree Celsius or about 2 degrees Fahrenheit around the world, despite the fact that it's cold just here in the eastern part of North America, so Canada and also the United States. And Some people think that this crazy cold air and the crazy winter we had in New York City last year, where we had 4 snowstorms in 3 weeks and we had a really crazy cold January, could actually be due, believe it or not, to climate change, because there's leading research from scientists like Jennifer Francis at Rutgers University and other scientists who support her conclusions that it's manipulating the jet stream, that we're seeing storm tracks change. So that means bigger kind of ridges in the jet stream, bigger dips, these bigger perturbations, kind of making for storms or cold air masses that sink further south, and also heat that goes further north. So it's just throwing everything off kilter. So global warming doesn't mean it's going to be getting warmer everywhere. It means it's going to be getting warmer on average, but certain places might get colder, and we might be seeing exactly that right now in the eastern United States.
A small group of about 150 migrants broke away from a larger caravan to push within 500 feet of the U.S. border. The migrants say they were seeking asylum in the U.S. and wanted Mexican authorities to address poor conditions for the thousands of migrants taking shelter in Tijuana. The mayor of Tijuana declared an international humanitarian crisis, saying they are unequipped to handle the growing number of the caravan. The latest counts from Mexican authorities put over 6,000 migrants in Tijuana. The president tweeted this morning, writing, "Republicans and Democrats must come together finally with a major border security package, which will include funding for the wall. After 40 years of talk, it is finally time for action. Fix the border for once and for all, now."
Joining me now is Brandon Judd. He is the president of the National Border Patrol Union. Mark Krikorian, executive director of the Center for Immigration Studies, and Saman Nasseri, an immigration attorney and activist. Brandon, I want to start with you. You were part of that White House meeting that ended with the authorization of force along the border. Is this all an invented threat at the border, in your estimation, as many in the media are now saying?
No, absolutely not. All you have to do is look at the number of people that are gathering in Tijuana that are waiting to come across the border, and these threats that they're going to storm our ports of entry are it's an obvious sign that they do not care about our laws, that they're going to do what they need to do for their own benefit instead of doing it in a legal manner. Again, if you look, when I was in that meeting, what I saw is an unwavering determination to secure the borders for the American public, for the safety of the American public. And we appreciate that, and we appreciate that determination that the president has.
Saman, your reaction. I mean, look, this is the head of the border union. He knows what's going on there, given what his members are feeding back to him. Your reaction.
And I think the conversation shouldn't be so much about the caravan, but I think the caravan sheds light more on the fact that our immigration system is truly broken. The fact that this is what's considered a real threat is 5,000 people coming to the border seeking asylum. Why is that? Why are they the issue? Why isn't the system the issue? Because these people haven't stampeded. They haven't rushed the border. They're not carrying weapons with them. No one has seen them try to hurt anybody. So why are we making the people escaping their problems the issue? Why aren't we trying to criticize the actual immigration system and fix that problem?
Well, let's hold it there a minute, Saman. I mean, there are abuses of the asylum system going on. Asylum is when you're under persecution, not just because I'd like a better job in a nicer neighborhood, right? Mark Krikorian, your reaction.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, I'd say that the broader system is the problem, and the system is we have asylum rules that incentivize people to make these bogus asylum claims, to essentially use asylum as a strategy for illegal immigration, because none of these people has any realistic expectation of actually getting political asylum at the end of the day. They're doing this to apply for asylum as a way of getting past the border, and then they're home free. This has been going on since the Obama administration really kind of incentivized it, and we're still dealing with the fallout from it. That's why we have this caravan, and that's why there are other caravans behind them that are trying to do the same thing.
I want to roll this tape. This is Kirstjen Nielsen, the Homeland Security Chief, along the border. Listen.
The reality is that there are currently over 6,200 individuals camped out south of the U.S. border in Tijuana today as I stand here. In Mexicali, there are more than 3,000 caravan members. These two groups, combined with other caravans making their way through the Northern Triangle in Mexico, will result in approximately 8,000 to 10,000 migrants amassing along our southern border. The crisis is real, and it is just on the other side of this wall.
Your reaction. I want to go to Brandon Judd.
Well, again, if you look at this, this is not about legal immigration. This is about illegal immigration. If those people are not, they're not going to wait until they go through the ports of entry. They're going to cross the border illegally. And the first act that they're going to make when they come to the United States is an illegal act. That should make everybody a little bit concerned about what the motives are.
What about the criminal element here that's being reported? They claim they have 500 criminals as part of these caravans. Saman, does that mean nothing to you? We should just open up, let these people in, let them come in under the asylum laws?
No, and I think that's the wrong characterization of the argument. And I don't think these people aren't coming to the port of entry and crossing illegally.
Saman. It's not a characterization at all.
It is. It's a characterization
it's
because
what
there's
Homeland
no proof.
Security
There's no
is telling
evidence
us
of that
right now. This is what they're
There's
saying.
no evidence of that.
Oh, so
Department of
Kirstjen
Homeland
Nielsen
Security
is lying?
has issued a memo. No, the Department of Homeland Security has already issued a memo saying, hey, we need to work with Mexico to try to vet these people in Mexico, keep them in Mexico, go through the asylum process there, and then take it on a case-by-case basis and see who qualifies, see who doesn't, and pass them through the port of entry. There's absolutely no evidence or no proof that these guys are going to show up to the port of entry, bum rush the border, and run through and become quote-unquote illegal immigrants. They're coming to the border seeking asylum. And it's unfair to say that all of them don't have a plausible case, because some of them really do probably have a very plausible case. And unfortunately, they get washed up with the ones that are just coming here because they want a better job. But the truth is, there are a handful of them, a good few dozen, I would say even a few hundred of them that have a good case, that are living in bad conditions, that have seen people get murdered, that have had family members get murdered. I see them. I turn away dozens of people from my office who I say, I can't help, you don't have a good case. But every once in a while, someone in this situation comes in and has a good case.
There's no doubt the asylum laws need to be revisited, but perhaps we've not been looking at them in the right way. And I think, you know, we can't just have my father waited a year in line before he even had his papers recognized. Then he came into the country with a sponsor. Then he served in the military before becoming a citizen. There has to be an orderly process. Thank you, gentlemen, all for your contributions. Here now to explore whether the president has the constitutional authority to use U.S. troops to protect the border and on American soil, the border agents. We're joined by Donald Bramer. He's a former intelligence officer, an Iraq veteran, and Joel Rubin, former Obama Deputy Secretary of State. Joel, I want to start with you. You believe the president was wrong to send the troops to the border because of the unclear mission. But isn't protecting the southern border and enforcing standing immigration laws mission enough?
Well, Ray, there is no mission. There's no military mission here. There's no clarity about the end point, what the objectives will be for these soldiers. And really, even if there's a technical ability of the president to send the troops there, it's a bad judgment. And this president has a habit of using our troops as political props, and that was the intent for this prior to the midterm elections, to turn out the vote. And really, these troops are doing nothing there. They're sitting, they're waiting, they're doing support. We have civilian enforcement that can do the job. We don't need to have our troops at the border.
Donald, are you concerned about this so-called human stampede that has been threatened? Is that a reality? And is that similar to what we saw in the summer when the border was under such pressure?
Well, this stampede, if you will, is a very real reality. And a lot of these folks that are coming to our border are known criminals. And we've already found cases of weapons among them. And you know, even in Tijuana, they're talking about disorderly conduct, drunkenness. These are not the type of people that we want in the United States. You know, I applaud the president. Maybe all of his tactics aren't always the best, but we have a right to protect our borders.
Donald, I want to play something for you. And Joel, this is Senator Kamala Harris. She said this the other day. I want to get your reaction.
These folks who are being deployed there, they're going to leave. They've left their families. They will not be home, looks like, for Thanksgiving. And all because there needed to be some demonstration for the TV cameras based on a political agenda instead of what is a national security threat.
Donald, does the president have the authority to deploy troops in this way? There is that act, that Pace Comitatus Act, that forbids using the military to enforce domestic law. Does that apply here?
Well, these soldiers and forces, they're not law enforcement officials, but he does have the right to deploy them because it is his right as commander-in-chief to support this country, whether it's in humanitarian aid or supporting our borders. And this is something that's been precedent before. President Nixon did it, President Reagan did it, President Bush did it, and President Obama did it. It's been done before. It's his right, and he has to protect this country.
Joel, your reaction?
Well, I really believe that we could find the $100 million that we spent on sending the troops there, better uses for that money. We could be sending it to the countries to help stabilize them so people don't leave.
You don't believe there's a national security threat, Joel?
I believe that our civilian agents from DHS are capable of handling this, and I don't believe that we need to have troops at the border now being authorized to shoot at a caravan of individuals who, there are some unruly ones, but by and large, the overwhelming majority are women and children waiting in camps to go through an asylum process.
Well, it's not all women and children, or you wouldn't have the 34 arrests, coke possession. No, you've got people with coke possession. They're carrying weapons. They're being arrested now by the Tijuana government.
And the civilian police can handle that as they should. And the orderly process, or the process that is in place, is working, and it should work. We don't need to have military troops there to enforce the process that is already being executed properly.
Donald, your thoughts? Do we need those troops or not? Or is Trump just playing fast and loose here?
No, I do think we need the troops. Right now, CBP is 80% undermanned right now. And if only for a short period, if these troops can support them to do the logistic things so that the CBP officers can do their job, then that's important. If they're observing and they're providing support, then let them do their jobs so that CBP can actually perform what they're hired to do.
Gentlemen, I'll give each of you a shot at this. Should the president close the border down? Does he have the authority to do so? Donald, you first, then Joel, very quickly, 10 seconds each.
Whether or not he should or should not, that remains a question as we look forward to the caravan as it moves forward. Does he have the authority? Absolutely. It's his right to defend this country, to defend our borders, and to protect the United States citizens.
Yeah, Joel, if he believes there is a national security threat, clearly he can close down the border.
National security threat should always be dealt with, but it's an American value to allow people seeking asylum to come here to this country. We need to keep that border open for those people.
Well, we let 1 million people in a year as citizens. I think that shows the welcoming spirit of America. Thank you, gentlemen.
Dozens of people, including children, have been hospitalized after an apparent chemical attack targeting the Syrian city of Aleppo. That is according to the Russian Defense Ministry. These here are images of victims being pulled into hospital for treatment. Medics say they exhibited symptoms consistent with chlorine exposure. Now, Russian military chemists are working at the scene of the attack. The Russian Defense Ministry says the attack was carried out at night, with the shelling coming from an area controlled by Tahrir al-Sham, an al-Qaeda-affiliated group in neighboring Idlib province. However, militant commanders deny any involvement, insisting that they don't actually have any chemical weapons. Well, let's get some reaction and analysis now. Ali Rizk, a Middle East Affairs commentator, joining us live here on RT International. Good day to you, sir. Thanks for joining us here on RT International. Experts are at the scene. Russian military chemists are there collecting data. How long do you think until they can fully determine what actually happened?
Well, I think that, the determination should be made very shortly. I don't think it will take too much time, especially because, this shelling, as we heard in your news item, came from an area which was controlled by Al-Qaeda and its allies. I did hear some information today as well that there were some French forces or special troops, call them what you want, which were present in the exact same location from where these missiles or these chemical toxins were launched. So that's also something to bear in mind. I'm not sure if that is true, but I have heard this news today, this morning. Generally speaking, I don't think, as I said, it's going to be very hard to uncover what happened. And the Russian authorities have been saying all along that, or have been warning that the terrorist groups do indeed possess such chemical poisonous material and the capability of chemical weapons. And I think this only further proves or underscores this factor. In addition to another important point, if it does turn out that the terrorists are behind this attack, which I think they are, that further reinforces the need to go ahead and launch this offensive against Idlib, because as you mentioned, this attack was launched from Idlib. And if the terrorists are left alone for more time, I think that they will only continue with such attacks, which I think makes it more and more imperative to go ahead as soon as possible to eliminate these terrorists who have this large haven in the Idlib province.
Now, Ali, there have been warnings about militant groups possibly staging chemical attacks as a provocation. You and I have been doing this for years now, and we've seen this time and time and time again of certain provocations being staged in Syria. If indeed there are militants behind this supposed chlorine attack, what would they have to gain from it?
Well, one thing they would possibly gain, I think, is that they could say that, the Syrian war isn't over, that we, the terrorists, we're still alive. We can still carry out attacks. That's one thing, maybe a way to boost the morale, possibly. Another factor which is quite important is that they could prevent the return of those Syrians who fled the country. This could maybe be an attempt by the terrorists to prevent these people from returning, whether it be Syrians here in Lebanon, Turkey, Jordan, anywhere in the world, because we have seen a strong, return of those Syrian displaced who fled. They are currently returning to Syria. This particular attack as well could be, as I said, an intimidation to prevent them from returning. So there are a number of ways, I think, or a number of goals which the terrorists would be trying to achieve by launching such an attack. But, once again, I can't emphasize enough the necessity now of going ahead and getting rid of this safe haven which the terrorists still enjoy in Idlib, especially after this attack.
Police clashed with demonstrators in France on Saturday as anger continues to grow over the country's rising fuel taxes. Thousands across France are also protesting President Emmanuel Macron's administration. Macron has defended the fuel tax, saying they're necessary to wean the country off fossil fuels. Lisa Hamp-Lee from our partners at the BBC reports.
A sea of yellow, the protesters in their trademark high-vis jackets on the Champs-Élysées. The authorities mean business too, using water cannon and tear gas against the thousands of protesters, trying to prevent them moving down to the Palais de la Concorde and the presidential palace, which has been cordoned off. Organisers bill this as Act 2 in their rolling campaign. They're angry about an increase in diesel tax, justified by the government as an anti-pollution levy. But the campaign has grown into a broad opposition against President Emmanuel Macron. This metalworker says, "We feel like we've been working for years now, and it's just extortion, while members of the government live like princes. It's not even possible to live anymore after paying taxes," says this woman. "I'm disgusted. I'm telling you, if I saw him, I wouldn't be able to shake his hand, and I'd tell him exactly what I think." Some here have been ripping up the street and trying to build barricades. But as protesters let off fireworks, the authorities have the power to move them on. Close to 300,000 people protested across France last week. It's estimated that by the end of today, 30,000 will have taken to the streets here in Paris. Lisa Hamp-Lee, BBC News.
Police in India say they've recovered the body of an American who was killed by an isolated island tribe that is known for attacking outsiders. 7 fishermen were arrested for helping the tourists get to the island, which is heavily restricted by the Indian government. The tribe lives on the island alone and throws spears and stones at outsiders. The investigation is ongoing.